Oh, thank you everyone for your patience. It's just getting the last couple of things set up here. We're going to call the regular meeting of November 8th, council meeting to order. As we gather, we always start as we always do, just acknowledging that we're gathered on the traditional territories of the Coast and the Straits Salish peoples, specifically the Lekwungen speaking people known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations. And we recognize that the historic connections they have to these lands continue to this day. First item of the agenda is approval of the agenda, but we have a couple of revisions on here. We just have to remove item 6.1, which was a presentation originally scheduled for tonight, and item 8.2, both of which have been delayed to a future meeting. So if I may, just have a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Don't see any hands up, so all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 3, we have adoption of minutes of the regular council meeting of October the 25th. I get a motion to approve.
Move adoption.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussions, corrections, changes? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you very much. Under item number 4, we have receipt of the committee minutes. We have 2 minutes here from the Public Art Advisory Committee, September 22nd and October 20th. We can get a motion to approve or to receive the minutes. Moved, seconded. Thank you. I just make a note, and I meant to point this out earlier, and my apologies. Councillor Braithwaite caught this, was just the name of the art piece is listed in the minutes. I think phonetically as Takaya, but it's officially known as Takaya. So just maybe capture that change, because it's we've changed that name. Councillor Ney, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just as I was thumbing through these minutes, it's a good update. I'm glad to see the committee is up and running again. And yeah, just Councillor Braithwaite, if you pass back, I'm really keen to hear about some of the ideas they have that are being put forward, suggested anyways, during the planning sessions. I was just wondering through you, Mayor, if our liaison could just expand on, it's in the October 20th meeting. It's noted that there was an update by our liaison about the progress with local First Nations regarding the processes around the call for action. I'm just wondering if Councillor Braithwaite might just expand, let us know what's going on, who's consulting with that kind of thing.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I was just basically, all I said in that meeting was that we would be going to them to look for help in the consultation piece around the First Nations, looking for First Nations artists for the possible pieces of art for the council chambers.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Just one other thing that caught my attention, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if it's not specifically relevant to the minutes, but I'm just wondering, while we're here on this, the topic of this committee, I know we talked about this at the committee, and I know we're still trying to work on the Arts Laureate designate, but I was wondering if we ever did get around to doing an exit interview with the Arts Laureate, and if that were to be done, would that be a staff thing or a council exercise?
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Perhaps we can get an update at a different time on this, but Ms. Vrella or Councillor Braithwaite? Ms. Vrella?
Thank you, Your Worship. It is my understanding that the previous Arts Laureate did provide a written synopsis that was distributed to members.
Okay, I probably missed that, but thank you very much. So, I guess my follow-up question then, to bring the pieces together as we move towards looking for an Arts Laureate, will that segue into that call or who we're looking for, or I don't recall that. Actually, I vaguely remember that, Ms. Varela, so thank you for that. Maybe I should go back to that. But just in terms of process, what was there anything significant in that would be relevant to, you know, who we're looking for, what that might look like, to the work of the committee, what council might do? Maybe it's just something I need to review again for myself, but it was
Ms.
just a
Rowley, did you
thought.
want to add something?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can recirculate that to council to refresh all of our memories, Councillor Ney. I don't have that information at my fingertips, so my apologies.
No, it was just a thought that came into my mind as I was going through the minutes. So thank you very much, Ms. Varela. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the minutes? I don't see any. So we have two, we're just doing them together. So all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. And moving on to item number 5 in the agenda, my remarks as mayor. So thank you all for being here, and for the 2 remote attendees. I want to just acknowledge that today is Indigenous Veterans Day. This is the day where we recognize First Nation, Métis, and Inuit soldiers and veterans and their long distinguished legacy of serving in the Canadian Armed Forces. So just want to express Council's appreciation on this special day for their service. And obviously we had our flags lowered to half-mast today, so if people were wondering why, that was the rationale out front. Also want to remind people that we do have a Remembrance Day ceremony that is available in person for those who are comfortable and vaccinated to come out, but we also do a live stream for those who are looking for a safer or more isolated option to still share those moments of remembrance together. There's also, of course, a concert of remembrance that's happening tomorrow night, put on by the College of Performing Arts here in Oak Bay. I just want to remind everybody that's watching that it is leaf pickup time today. I'm sure it's hard to avoid knowing that when you see the piles of leaves everywhere. There is a pickup schedule that gives sort of blocks of time where north, south, and central Oak Bay are being picked up. So have a look at that. And I just want to ask everybody, if you could make sure that any storm drains in your neighborhood are kept clear, as we tend to have some flooding incident and most heavy rain times around this time of year as some get plugged up with leaves. And finally, but certainly not least, I want to just recognize in these chambers something that we recognized on Sunday, and that is the Hall of Fame Award for Ms. Margaret Lidke. This Hall of Fame Award for Parks and Rec is in recognition of over 30 years of work that she's done to restore our natural park systems, working with schools, working with volunteers, founding Friends of Uplands Park, and in so many ways contributing to our community and continues to do so. So this is an award in progress as she continues that long and very important work. She's really helped thousands of people both give their time to help, but also raise the awareness of our natural systems in the community. So thank you very much for all your work, Ms. Lidke. It's very much appreciated, and it was a lovely ceremony and nice to have people out on the Sunday. And I guess I should also just thank folks like Ron Carter and our staff who did so much to organize that Tree Appreciation Day as well. It was a very special day. That concludes my comments. So up next we have item number 8, which is bylaws. Is it number 8? Is that right? Sorry, I've got my pages out of order. Item number 7. So as I move to item number 7, item number 7 point, sorry, I'm going back to my pages here. We have no item 6, so item number 7 is just appointments to external committees. These are largely unchanged from previous years. Although I think we're moving the Yes Awards from a formal Council of Committee, because it really isn't a Council of Committee, so that'll just be handled more informally going forward. Any discussion on that? Okay, he's getting someone to move. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Is there a hand? Sorry, I see hands going up. Thanks. Moved and seconded for approval. Any other discussion? And just for those who are watching as well, if you wish to see who's acting mayor at various times of the year and who's responsible for various portfolios, this is the place you can have a look. I don't see any discussion. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Chair. I see that yourself, myself, and Councillor Patterson have been assigned to the Oak Bay Parcel Tax Roll Review Panel. Could you please, or maybe could staff please remind me the last time that panel met? I know legally we have to have it, but I have a feeling it hasn't been met in over 10 years.
I think it was 1941, Councillor Zelka, that it was last met. Actually,
Thank you.
I don't know. It's been a very long time since before I was on
It has.
council. Does the staff have any idea when it last convened? You're right. It is required to have it should we need it, but
Yes.
staff,
All right,
any?
that's fine. Thank you very much. I just want to confirm that it has been a long time. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no worries. Ms. Williams, is there any, do you have a date?
Just to let you know that it is a required body to have, and should you need it, it typically meets once a year.
Thank you very much. Don't see any other discussion, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you very much, everyone. And thanks for your input onto that. And item number 7.2 on the agenda, we have the appeal of decision on the Leyland Cypress tree removal. I understand we have members of the public here who wish to come and address council as well. But perhaps I can get Mr. Hidley, I believe is online, to give a quick overview of this item.
Actually, Your Worship, I'll provide the overview if that's okay with you.
Of course. Welcome, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship. I hadn't prepared Mr. Hidley to do that on my behalf. So the district has a tree protection bylaw that regulates the management of trees within the district's boundaries. In that bylaw, the manager of park services is delegated the authority to approve or deny a request to remove a tree. The decision to remove or the decision to approve or deny is based on criteria that's laid out in the bylaw. In June 24th, using that established criteria, the manager of park services denied a property owner's request to remove a Leyland cypress on the northwest corner of 880 Island Road. The property owner has exercised their rights under the bylaw to appeal that decision to council. Council may choose this evening to confirm the decision, overturn the decision, or modify the decision in some way. The property owner was notified of council's intent to consider the information this evening and has elected to have an agent, Mrs. Jackie Dorgan, represent their interests here today. Mrs. Dorgan and Mr. Moen are in the waiting room, and staff will bring them in so that they can address council. In addition, Chris Hidley, the manager of park services, is also available should council wish to direct any questions to staff.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. And I will note for those watching, that was probably a bit of a briefer overview than you might be used to on these. But this did come before council previously as the applicant wasn't here and we felt there wasn't adequate notice. We put this off and made sure we provided written notice to the occupant of the house to make sure that they were aware that we would be considering that. And so it's back in front of us today, but we've already had a fairly detailed overview of the nature of the tree, and so we're back here again now. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
I just realized I think you were the first members of the community that have come in here and sat at the new desk. So this is Tommy Douglas's desk from
Great.
his constituency office in Saskatchewan from back in the day. So gifted to the community as a community desk to come sit at. So you're the first. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I hope it bodes well. My grandparents would be thrilled to know I'm sitting at Tommy Douglas's desk. I appear here as agent for Linnea Rodier of 880 Island Road. And by letter that she wrote to the council on June 30th, 2021, she advised council that she had appointed me, I'm a neighbor of hers, as her agent to act in all matters in the conduct of this reconsideration request. The background to Ms. Rodier's application to reconsider the denied permit to remove a Leyland cypress, or Leyland, from her property as found in Ms. Williams' report, and she already referred to it at page 2. I'll just highlight a couple of things in that regard. Just a moment. And that is that the property owners at 880 in April 2017 applied for a permit. They were granted a pruning permit, which they acted upon and reduced the size of the Leyland to some degree as per the terms of the permit. And then in May of this year, they applied for the removal. That permit was denied, and hence we're here. Just so council is aware, I appeared before this council almost 4 years to the day ago in 2017 in respect of an appeal from a permit that was denied to us when we were requesting the removal of a Leyland from our property. And I have written a letter in support of this application, which should be in the material that you have. I'd also just like to pass up, if I might.
We have some limits of handing around things, but we have photos of the site, I think,
You have
already.
one photo, yeah.
Did you
Okay.
wish to, yeah.
If you'd rather not, that's fine, it's here, they're here.
We
if you wanna
we
look.
can manage it, I think, perhaps, if you can.
Pardon me?
If you can put a mask back on, we can have staff come and
Okay,
distribute it.
I'll just hand it up to you. There are 2 copies of the same.
You can just hand it to Ms. Varela to your right there, and
They're the same photographs, just 2 copies.
okay. Thank you very much. Please continue.
This Leyland is a protected tree under the bylaw, and it's defined as protected by the bylaw. It's not a protected tree by virtue of its species in the bylaw. That is, it's not a listed species that is protected, a Gary oak, an arbutus, a Pacific Western yew, a black hawthorn, a shore contorta pine, or a Pacific Western flowering dogwood. And nor is it a significant tree as described in Schedule D of the bylaw. It's a protected tree because of its size. Its diameter at breast height is greater than 30 centimeters. Neither the diameter at breast height nor the vertical height and lateral spread of this tree was measured or is before you. And the reason I draw that to your attention is when we were before council in respect of our Leyland, the tree had been measured. And our tree, when it came down, is probably slightly smaller than the rhodiola tree is now. And according to Mr. Paul, the municipal arborist, our tree was then, the DBH, or the diameter at breast height, was 127 centimeters. The bylaw says you're protected if you're over 30. The height and spread of our tree was 45 feet, or thereabouts, 15 meters. I believe the rhodiola tree is somewhat larger than ours, but it's just a guess with the naked eye. The irony of this situation is that this Leyland is a protected tree, thereby requiring a permit to deal with it in any way. Because of its size, its diameter at breast height. And it is precisely its size that causes the problem for the owner in this case, and for the nearby neighbors who have written to you to tell you what they experienced living next door to this tree. Its impact is described by Ms. Rodier in her letter dated October 31st, 2021, she tells you that they spent significant money on the pruning that didn't do anything. She refers to the fact that a tree this size has a huge drip line. Everyone, or most people would appreciate that. You can't grow anything under it or around it. It sucks all the water out of the property. It has a significant amount of foliage that it drops. It affects the nutrients and the acidity level of the soil, and it's just impossible to use it with anything else for a wide circumference around it, which is a significant amount of land in a small urban lot. And Ms. Rodier describes to you that experience they had. Planting vegetables they wouldn't grow. I just want to point out that the neighbors who write in support were asked whether they objected if this tree came down. And they didn't object, and they not only didn't object, but they said they were in favor and they were willing to write to the council to indicate why. As far as Ms. Williams' report is concerned on page 2, in giving you the background, she notes the Lelande's habit of rapid growth, and she notes as well and describes it as, quotes, it's generally considered a very poor tree. In Ms. Rodier's submission, this tree is inappropriate by species to be grown on her lot. And furthermore, I would point out, as Ms. Williams did, that in Oak Bay's own bylaw, the list of approved trees in the bylaw does not include a Lalande. The list of approved trees are those, according to the bylaw, that are recommended as an acceptable species suitable for Oak Bay's current and future climate, and that's in Schedule C of the bylaw. The problem with this tree, as far as the owner is concerned, it's ever expanding, and it's not amenable to control through pruning. Given its rapid growth, it's far from over in terms of growing. It's going to do this every year. Its growth is dense, its strip line expansive. It takes a significant portion of an urban lot and renders it unusable for pretty well any other purpose. And the photograph of the rhodiola tree that I handed up to you may show you that it's a great place to grow weeds in and around that tree and not much else. And the other problem with it is the volume and nature of its dead foliage negatively impacts companion planting in its vicinity. And of course, it puts the rhodiola property and adjoining properties in significant shadow a good part of every sunny day. And it's dense, it's a conifer. It stays blocking the light, the sky, in all seasons, 365 days a year. The manager of Park Services can't grant a permit for removal of this tree on any of the grounds I've just enumerated to you. The bylaw doesn't give the manager of Park Services that responsibility or power. On a reconsideration, however, you're the elected council, and you're not bound by such strictures. If you look in the bylaw in section 13, there is nothing that limits your discretion. In section 13.5, on a permit reconsideration, council may confirm, overturn, or modify the decision of the manager of Parks Services, period. Because of the problems that I've outlined to you, that Mr. Paul couldn't take into account, or the manager of Park Services couldn't take into account, and because those things are not mentioned in this bylaw, you are not bound by such strictures, implicitly or explicitly. And so on Ms. Rodier's behalf, I ask you to in your discretion, consider those problems that this tree in this place creates for your constituents. In considering how you would exercise this discretion, I suggest and urge you to ask and submit to you that you would consider the intent and objectives of the bylaw, and allowing this tree to come down would not be in conflict with those objectives. I ask you to consider the submissions of the owner and of the adjacent affected property owners, and to consider Council's strategic priorities, that of fostering community health and resilience, which has been outlined in Ms. Williams' report, and of promoting quality of life and sense of place. And that in so doing, that you would conclude in overturning the denial of the permit, you will support, not defeat, the intent or objectives of the bylaw. Those objectives are to ensure a vigorous approach to management and stewardship of the urban forest, as is in the public interest. That's what your constituents ask of you. And to ask that you support a well-adapted, diverse tree population by engaging and partnering with the community. And finally, I note that Ms. Rodier is a tree lover, actually. It's not that she doesn't like trees. She's lived in this property for 7 years and planted 7 trees. And oddly enough, 3 of the trees that she has planted are approved trees under our own bylaw, Oak Bay's own bylaw, under Schedule C, the river birch, the Quonset cherry, and the Japanese maple. And she planted some of those trees before this bylaw was even passed in, I believe it's March 2020 that the bylaw was passed. And when I asked her how on earth she knew the names of these trees, she showed me. She has them all tagged. She has bought them at some significant cost and nurtured them over the years, and they're healthy and thriving. Thank you very much for your attention to this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Dorgan. And Mr. Moen, did you wish to add anything, or you're just here to answer questions as well?
No, I'm just here for moral support.
Excellent. Moral support is always appreciated. Thank you very much for that. And at this point, we'll come back to the council table, and council, you're welcome to ask questions of the applicant or the agent of the applicant and the or
Yes.
staff.
Yes.
Are there any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to staff. And this is probably just confirming with Mr. Hyde-Lay that I recall from the previous material and previous reference to the tree that the tree is in all aspects healthy. Am I correct in saying that the tree is healthy and is doing well?
Thank you, Councillor Appleton, and through the chair, yes, the tree is healthy in all respects.
I just realized the awkwardness of having that one microphone for the pieces for both the applicant. It's okay. I'm just going to repeat the answer for those at home. The answer was yes. It is the tree is healthy at this point.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. And this is just out of curiosity, and this will be a question to staff as well. Mr. Hyde-Lay, do we know about how many examples of this type of tree in this situation where it's overgrown like this there are in the municipality?
Mr. Hyde-Lay.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite, and through the chair. There's quite a few throughout the municipality. One of its parents is the Monterey cypress, of which we have many species throughout South Oak Bay in particular, that you could make the same argument for. They may be a little bit more of an aesthetically attractive tree, but just as vigorous in nature. But there's quite a few large Leyland cypresses in the district.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I have Councillor Nath and Councillor Green.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few questions through you, Mayor, to staff. How much life is left in this tree?
Mr. Headley?
Thank you, Councillor Nair. And through the chair, quite a few years. They're not a short-lived tree by any means. I would probably say that it would be mature or early mature in its life. It could be maintained for, it would continue to grow for another 50 years at least.
Okay, and I wasn't at the last meeting where probably more detail about the tree was provided, but I was just wondering, so it's kind of, I don't know, midlife or whatever, but what's the root system for this kind of tree? Does it go deep or is it shallow? The question I'm wondering about is it at risk at all from, the increasingly intense winds that are anticipated because of climate change around these parts?
Thank you, Councillor. We may find out tonight with the strong winds if the tree is strong enough to stand up to it. Mr. Heidley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Councillor May. It is a tree because of its rapid growth rate that is relatively weak wooded because of the gap in the growth increments. So it is somewhat failure prone under snow load in particular, and certainly high winds if it's exposed. If left to grow in its natural genetic form.
Thank you, Mr. Heidley.
Can I ask, is it exposed and would this be called in its natural genetic form, this particular tree?
It's beginning to reestablish that form, but it has been trimmed in the past, so it has a little bit of a more tighter architectural look to it than if it was left to grow naturally.
And from what I understand from the applicant there, there was another similar tree around the same size. Do you recall, Mr. Heidley, it sounds like the council of the day gave permission to take it down. Can you help us? I don't know if you recall. I'm sorry, I should perhaps have prompted you before this, but do you have a recollection what the rationale for that was at that time?
Thank you, Councillor Nay. Mr. Heidley?
Thank you, Councillor Nay, and through the chair. What I remember, it was fully on the adjacent property, so the placement of the tree was different than this one. This one straddles two properties or is partially owned by both neighbors. So I think the location may have come into consideration in regards to that.
The location being
the actual location on the actual property may have been a little bit more imposing than this one is.
Okay. And
if I remember correctly.
Okay, I did go by this today. There's a back alley there, and I just rode down the back alley. But I did notice it was infringing on a fence that was being built there, and in terms of the bylaw and where we call interference or hardship around structures. Is a fence considered one of those structures or not?
Mr. Heidley,
no, we would always look at a modification of the fence to accommodate the tree.
Okay.
And we often have.
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you, Councillor Nay. And I recall that the last approval came under the old bylaw where we did have to cite the aspects of the bylaw that we could allow it for, and I can't remember myself. I think it may have to do with hardship on the neighboring property, but I can't recall exactly the rationale given at that time. And I do believe it was a split vote on that one as well. Go ahead, Councillor Green, and then Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Ms. Dorgan and Mr. Moan for being here with us tonight and for the information that you've provided. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Heidley, Mr. Hidley, is this species on any public property in Oak Bay? And if so, what is your maintenance schedule and approach to maintaining a tree like this as parks manager and with arborist staff? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Mr. Hidley.
Thank you, Councillor Green, and through the chair. We don't have any Leyland cypress on municipal property that I'm aware of. But it would really depend on the location and species or location if we did. That would really reflect the pruning of this particular tree. We do, on the other hand, have Monterey cypress, which is one of the parent trees, which we do modify on a regular basis for a number of reasons, and one is to minimize the potential of failure because they are an exposed tree.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Hidley. Just follow up. When you say regular basis, what does that mean? Can you just define that for us? Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Hidley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the chair. There's a couple of examples along the waterfront, in particular down by Kitty Island, where the tree is modified annually, as it always has been, just to keep it tight and compact and just make it a little bit more stable for prevailing winds. View consideration comes into that management practice a little bit because it's always been looked after. But we also have some large specimens up by Walbrand Park, et cetera, Monterey cypress again, that would be pruned as required.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. And a question through you to staff. I'm looking at the satellite view on Google Maps to try and get a sense for the sort of tree, the canopy coverage of this property. The property owner suggests that she has planted 7 trees on this property, and it also appears that there are additional trees on the public thoroughfare or the public road allowance next to Island Road is the impression I'm getting. So first question is just to confirm, are there additional trees on the public allowance at the front of the property on the Island Road side that are owned, I presume, by Oak Bay?
Mr. Hidley, do you know if we have boulevard trees directly in front of this house?
Thank you, Your Worship. Not off the top of my head.
Okay, I apologize. I should have prepared you for that ahead of time. So with respect to the 7 trees that are there, the satellite view doesn't suggest how large they are, but the general question I'd like to know is, what is the current tree coverage or canopy coverage on the property with the tree in place today? And if that tree was removed, in your opinion, what would the canopy coverage be resulting? I know, if I remember correctly, our tree strategy is attempting to get a 35% coverage everywhere in Oak Bay, if I remember correctly, and you can correct me on that if I'm wrong. So if there's any way that you could provide some of those numbers in terms of tree canopy coverage, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Go ahead, Mr. Hidley.
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Zelka. I would have to do that calculation to figure out what the canopy coverage of that tree would be if it was removed, and also take into consideration the future canopy cover that the other trees that the resident has planted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I recall I asked this question in the last time this sort of came forward, and I was hoping that that you might have had a chance to possibly calculate it. I do note that this tree is currently planted on the extreme corner of the property, with a lot of the foliage over the public laneway at the back, and approximately half of what's remaining on one property and half of what's remaining on another property. So I presume the canopy coverage would be, generously saying half of whatever this tree is on one property and half on the other, not discounting the public aspect. So I guess the final question I would ask is there any reason why, or anything preventing the owner of this property, the owner of the property, from simply continuing to maintain the tree and trim it back. I understand it's originally designed or is often used as a hedge tree, and if it is controlled, it maintains a wonderful hedge. But it appears this one has been, shall we say, quote, let go to move towards a more natural state, whatever that means. But I understand that the owner could most likely get another permit for another 25% removal if they chose to.
Thank you, Councillor.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. I think that's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, the applicant has their hand up, and I'll go to you, but I actually have we seem to have expanded our questions, but I have a question for the applicant, so I'll ask my question. If you have a follow-up as well, you may do so. And my question is just, are you aware, is there a plan, the trees that have been planted are very much appreciated on the property, but they are smaller types of trees. I'm curious if there's any plan to replace this with maybe a deciduous version of a larger tree equivalent to kind of help maintain the tree canopy, or is this just a removal ask and no more?
Well, of the 3 trees that Ms. Rodier planted, one is from the medium size in the schedule, in the bylaw, and 2 are from the small approved tree sizes. Just in terms of how big they are, they cost hundreds of dollars. If she were to buy a tree that is even half the size of the one that she's asking to have taken down, an approved tree, it would be exceedingly expensive. And as far as ongoing pruning of this tree, a Leyland is supposed to be a hedge. On the property immediately to the south of Ms. Rodier, the Kissinger's property, they have a Leyland hedge. They cut it every year. It's about 5 feet high at the very most. This tree that we're talking about is 50 or 60 feet high. It is not possible for it to be pruned regularly, even if one wanted to spend what Ms. Rodier spent a couple of years ago, $1,600 to prune it. It's not in my submission on her behalf practical to suggest that this tree could be maintained and contained. It's not that kind of tree anymore. It's just simply not possible to do that. And finally, if I could ask for, insofar as the question to Mr. Hyde-Lay about whether or not there are municipal-owned trees at the front of the Rodier property, I suggest there isn't. Both the Rodier property and our property have ornamental plum trees in the front of the property, and so the streetscape, they're high enough to grow into the hydro lines. They're fairly significant. And when we last year were making arrangements for an arborist to come and prune our plum trees, we contacted the municipality to find out, is this your tree, is this our tree? We've lived there for 30 years, but we've never asked who owned the tree. And it was made clear to us that that was a private tree. And the Rodier tree is about the same location from the streetscape as ours is, so I assume it's not a municipal tree. If it is, it's not well looked after.
Okay.
So I hope it isn't.
Thank you very much for that. And just for the clarity, I wasn't, I appreciate you can't replace the tree of that size, but we're looking at a tree that might grow into another significant size.
It could be. I mean, this tree once was a small tree too. I've watched it grow for 30 years. It's 4, 5, 6 times. I don't doubt that the people who planted the Leyland that we were permitted to take down and the Rodier tree, I don't doubt they were small trees when they were planted. They just weren't looked after as hedge trees. And so now they create problems, and those problems are outlined in the letters that you have before you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Dorgan. Are there any other questions? Councillor Nay, your hand is still up. I'm not sure if you're looking to ask a follow-up or if that's just remaining there from the earlier question.
I just have one other question. It was partially answered by Councillor Zelka's question, but I wouldn't mind a bit more information if I may. This is just to
Hold on a second, Ms. Councillor Nay. I just need to move the microphone back here so we can hear you better. Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Mr. Hidley. What is the, you were talking about, the property owner could apply for another permit to trim the tree up another 25%. So, like, if you could do it 25% 1 year, could you do it, like, how much trimming would be permitted on this tree? We're one to want to take that tack, like how frequently and how much would be permitted? Like how small could the tree be trimmed down to? If it's, I do appreciate from what I've been hearing, it's not just the size, it's the way the tree's growing, in the yard, but size does seem to be a major consideration. So I'm just wondering if you could explain how much trimming could be done over time.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Mr. Hidley, you touched on this early in the previous meeting, but can you just explain to us the possibilities and limits of the trimming of a Leyland cypress?
Yes, thank you, Councillor May, and through the chair. The tree could be reduced in size by about 25%. That's all that you'd want to do because the tree is a relatively poor regenerator. The older wood or I shouldn't say that, it's a very good regenerator, but it doesn't regenerate well from old wood. So the farther you cut the tree back, the more difficult it is for the tree to break new wood from what's really dormant wood farther down the stem of the tree. So aesthetically, you're left with a relatively ugly tree because you've pruned it too aggressively. If you start early in Leyland cypress's life, but you can end up with a very beautiful hedge with annual pruning. But if it's done every 5 years or so, it's always a little bit of a challenge to have a tree that you'd look out your window and say that tree is aesthetically attractive.
Okay, and just one other question. Were it the case that the council were to permit the removal of the tree, what does the bylaw say about replacement trees? How many trees would we be asking to make up for the loss of one?
It would be one more tree, so it would be 1 for 1 in this particular case. There's a $50 permit fee attached to that's non-refundable, and a $500 deposit that is held for 1 year after planting date, and then returned once the tree is re-inspected after that 1 year.
Is there, I guess we have to stick with the bylaw. It doesn't say, a 1-to-1 doesn't seem to be quite compensating in terms of foliage and carbon sink that tree is providing. I mean, you'd be having a very young tree to a tree that's, doing a lot of work in terms of cleaning our air, I suppose.
That would be correct, Councillor Ney.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nay. I don't see any other questions. So back to the council table here. Just need a motion and we can talk to the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship. I would make a motion that the decision to deny the request from the Director of Park Services be upheld, be confirmed.
A second.
Moved and seconded. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Worship. I do. Council has heard me comment in a similar fashion on other trees that have been where reconsideration has been requested in the past. And I guess I will reiterate my view and my opinion on how these things should be considered, in that we are dealing specifically with a tree which has been confirmed to be healthy, large, and significant in the community. It is not impacting services or structures and where it's located. In fact, its location on the lot probably couldn't be farther from anything that it might impact in terms of services or structures. So as I've said before, in terms of these reconsideration requests, it then comes down to a judgment call on behalf of council as to whether or not a given tree is justified for removal. And in my view, many of the things that have been raised about this particular tree, which are being raised as a negative, are either common to all trees in terms of foliage drop, impact on the immediate area around the drip line, those things are common to all significant size trees. So it's difficult to say that a given tree needs to be removed for that purpose because that's common to all trees. Significance, its size and its shading is being raised here as a potential negative, when in fact, in my view, that is a positive, especially with the impacts from heat dome effects this past summer. We need as many significant sized trees affording shade to our community as we can get. Again, trees that are listed as exposed or potentially prone to failure, as council has heard me comment on before, every individual tree has a certain degree of being prone to failure or failure in some aspect. So that is, again, common to all trees. And aesthetics also does not, in my view, qualify as a justification for removing a tree. So again, this is less about the individual, in my view, less about the individual tree or presenting a rational argument for the removal of the tree, but rather the process by which council makes a decision on these things, again, is essentially rendering a judgment about if a given tree has value or is impactful. And I don't believe that that's our role. I believe that we take our professional judgment from our staff that have indicated this is a healthy tree that's not impacting services or structures, and therefore is not justified for removal. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Zulke, you seconded. Did you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. In addition to the comments from my esteemed colleague, which I agree with, the proponent suggested that one of the concerns with this tree was that it sucks up a lot of water. I actually consider that to be a positive, especially since with sea level rise and with the storms that we are imagining will potentially be coming, trees that can assist with moving the water out in an efficient way, I think is actually an asset. I'm sure at times during moments of times of drought, that's always a concern. As just sitting on the TRD Water Commission, I'm aware of that. But helping with the tree canopy cover, helping with keeping the moisture moving in an appropriate way, I don't see this as a deficiency. So I'll be supporting the motion as written and as proposed. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? I'm just going to speak on this. I struggle with this a little bit. I spoke before on this. I think the question does boil down to, is it the right tree? It becomes more and more difficult to replace trees as they get bigger and more difficult over time. And I do recognize this is the wrong tree. It's not, the Leyland cypresses should not be giant trees inside of our community. That being said, there's lots of wrong trees in our community that probably don't fit entirely ideally, but generally we tend to wait until they're at a point of failure before we move them on. I think under the new tree bylaw, where there is a replacement requirement, I feel more somewhat mollified, particularly where there is such a, I do see this as being problematic, where you have damage being caused underneath it, and really nothing grows under these trees, that there could be better trees planted on that. So at this moment, I'm leaning towards voting against the motion as it stands, but I do appreciate the case made by Councillor Appleton and Zulke is a very strong one on this front, in that it's definitely a borderline case as to where I might consider it. Councillor Green.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a difficult one, and I also empathize with the owner. We have a very large hedge of the Leyland cypress variety, as well as a giant maple in the front of our house, which is a municipal tree, actually. And from time to time, we've had concerns about the future of the safety of our home with the big maple tree. But we also, with our neighbor, have an agreement that we maintain the hedge together. And that does defray cost. I have to say, we pay half. And it's an interesting one because the hedge actually grows on our neighbor's property. But because it provides shade, green space, and habitat for birds, we are quite happy to contribute to the maintenance of the tree. The hedge. I will be supporting the motion. I am concerned, particularly in view of climate change, climate action. This summer was a shocking summer when the heat dome struck. And there are studies now that show that communities who do not have sufficient tree canopy and substantial tree canopy are much more vulnerable to illness. And we talked about quality of health and quality of life and so on and so forth. And these trees, given that they provide such a large shading canopy, do contribute to the quality of health and in the community, particularly in view of the heat dome episode, which I don't think will be the first one. And so I will be supporting the motion as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you, Mayor. I too appreciate the comments of Councillor Appleton and Councillor Green. I really struggle with this. I honestly do, because I am a big supporter of keeping the tree canopy the way it is in Oak Bay and to add to it rather than subtract from it. However, I look at this tree and I try to imagine if it was on my property and how I would be looking to handle it. And I think with all of the things that you have brought up and looking at how, even if you, as per Mr. Hidlay, even if you take away 25% of the canopy of it right now, it then lends itself to becoming a very unstable, ugly tree in the future, and it will grow only from the top, from what I understood Mr. Hidlay to say, and not from the bottom, and that then to me makes it become more unstable. So I really don't want to vote against this motion, but I do feel like I have to because of the difficulties that I think that this tree puts on the property owners. And so I will be voting against the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Go ahead, Councillor Nay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really struggling on this, and I think my colleagues have, exercised the arguments of the two. There's two lines of reasoning that one could take on this. So, I guess it's just really not straightforward, is it? I mean, we're talking about, of course, on one hand, the value that these trees offer our community. And I don't think there's anybody in the room here who doesn't recognize the true value that trees offer to us on the planet and in our community and on our properties more generally, or more specifically. But I think what's happening, this is not the tree, as others have said, that anybody would plant here. Certainly not to allow to grow to this extent, perhaps as a hedge that had been continuously pruned, but not allow the tree to get out of hand. And this was probably more the responsibility of a previous property owner, not the current property owner, as I understood that they have only lived there for the 7 years. So it becomes an issue of sort of people versus planet kind of consideration. And I'm trying to think of both of these issues at one time, and that's what's making this decision complex for me. But as a tree that's providing shade during a time when we are having increasingly warm climate and summers that where we're experiencing these heat domes, that is one consideration. But of course, in the winter, that tree, because it's a coniferous tree, is providing an enormous amount of shade as well. So, I mean, if we're going to think about planet, that means that the property owners having to use more resources to heat their property because they're not able to take advantage of the sun coming in. So, I mean, that's just another way to think of this. What bothers me really, so I think it's an awkward tree. We've been told that its root system is somewhat shallow, that it could be a vulnerable tree in high winds. It's not the tree that anybody would allow to grow to this extent. And the property owner, I mean, if we're going to talk about planet, another consideration is around food security. So people are all over the place are growing their own gardens. And it sounds, from what I'm seeing, and I could kind of see how the sun comes into this property, that it contributes shade, but also is it's not providing the kind of drainage you'd want for a garden. So, I mean, that's just another argument. But I do think that quality of life and a sense of place and a sense of community health are important considerations. So for all of those reasons kind of jumbled together, I with difficulty, and it's not an easy decision, I'm going to vote I'm not going to support the motion that's on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Any other councillors wish to speak? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson. I have a feeling like we need to have Solomon just cut the tree in half and see what happens then. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Wow, this is, perhaps it would better to speak first rather than last. However, it's a very difficult question for me. I agree with my colleagues around the table here, and certainly I think Councillor Appleton and Councillor Green spoke very, very well in the need and the sound judgment in maintaining our trees. But when I look at the size of the tree, and I look at to reduce it by 25%, it will, I think, as Mr. Heideley said, will not exactly produce a wonderful specimen, and yet I think that that is what the owner would be faced with doing. I also do appreciate, though, that the owner in this case has taken the initiative, without being forced to plant 7 trees that are quality trees in this community. And I really appreciate that, because it is something that you don't see on a lot of properties. I do appreciate it because I live in a property where I have a rather beat up Douglas fir that spans my neighbor's property and my property, and people have often said, some people have said, oh, it should come down, and yet we've kind of embraced the tree, and we keep it as a wildlife tree. So I appreciate that, but in its location, it doesn't really it doesn't cause any problems as far as food production, adverse effects to properties as its limbs come down. It's at no risk. So it really is the every given situation. So in this case, because the owner has taken the initiative to plant the 7 trees, and this tree, it is actually an overgrown shrub. I don't really. To be a full-size tree, if you let it grow to its full size, it'll be massive and far too large for a property of this size. So in this case, I am going to vote against the motion. I think that in this case, the owners should be allowed to have this tree removed and hopefully the 7 trees on the property will continue to grow, continue to thrive, and perhaps the owner will consider planting another specimen that is recommended suitable to the property. And I think with that, the canopy coverage that the owner is striving for on this lot is good in comparison to many properties in the district.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Is there any other discussion? I don't see any, so appreciate all the thoughtful comments. It's these come to our table because they're difficult, unfortunately, and this is where we get. But I love living in a community where we get to spend the time on issues like this and how important they are to us. So not seeing any other comments or hands, I will call the question. The motion on the floor, just for clarification, is to uphold the staff finding to decline the removal of the tree. So essentially, a vote in support is keeping the tree. A vote in opposition is a vote that you see that it's worthy of being removed. So with that, all those in favor of the motion to uphold, if I could see hands, Councillor Zelka, Councillor Appleton, and Councillor Green are in favor, and those opposed, Councillor Nay, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Braithwaite, and myself opposed. So that motion fails. I'm assuming there'll be a follow-up motion then in the other direction to...
I'd like to make a motion that we overturn the decision to deny the removal of the Leyland cypress tree at 88 Island Road.
Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. I think we've discussed this, but is there any other discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I will add to my earlier comments by saying that there will be, when another one of these comes before council, which they will, the decision making in this case, in my view, leads us to a situation where there would be very little justification that would need to be, or you would not be able to provide a case such that council would necessarily be able to uphold or deny a removal in this case. So I have significant concerns about setting a precedent for removing a large, healthy tree with no impacts to a structure based on the individual interpretation of impact on the property, which I think is a poor precedent to set. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. And notwithstanding the other comments that are the flip side of the argument, I will be opposing this motion. And to follow Councillor Appleton's comments, often I hear the words aesthetics. I hear the words, the tree doesn't look great and it will never look great, and those kinds of things. This tree is not failing. It is perfectly healthy. It is not near any structure other than a fence, which is not considered a hazard, a structure that is at hazard. And that these trees tend to be, or the situation can be inconvenient. I empathize, as I said, with the owner. This is a difficult situation, and I don't make my decision lightly. But if we continue, and I agree with Councillor Appleton, if we continue to move in this direction, and we have been faced with these decisions before around mature, healthy trees that have simply not been maintained on an annual or regular basis. If we continue to move in that direction, we do threaten our overall tree canopy in Oak Bay. And that concerns me greatly. And it is for those reasons that I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green and Councillor Appleton. I always appreciate when people are voting against something to explain why. So we appreciate that. Go ahead, Councillor Nay, and then Councillor Zelka.
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, just to staff, if I may, just for clarification, can a decision here fetter the decision of a future council on a similar issue?
I can answer that question, and the answer is no.
Thank you. Okay, for that. I appreciate the comments from our colleagues. This is hard for me, and it's not typical of me to do this, but the circumstances seem to justify this decision given the nature of the tree and where it is and the way it's impeding the livability of the property owner.
Go ahead, thank you, Councillor Nay. Councillor Zelka, and then Councillor Green, do you wish to speak again? Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, I apologize. I fail to understand how this tree affects the livability. But I'm sure there's an aspect there that I'm just not quite understanding. Since it certainly doesn't impact any shade on the building at all, and half of it is on overseeing another property. Anyway, so the question I would have, first question I'd have is through the chair to staff. If we don't make any additions or changes to this to the motion, does the tree bylaw insist on a particular replacement tree on the property itself? And if so, how many trees? And will the district have the choice of the tree species?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. The first answer was that there was be one-for-one replacement, but Mr. Heideley, is there any controls on the type or nature of the tree that would be used as a replacement?
Thank you, Your Worship. We would encourage a large tree, but the choice is up to the individual to select from the approved species. There's other trees that fall outside the approved species list. If it was a Gary oak, we certainly strongly encourage it to be a Gary oak, which it is not.
Thank you.
Follow up, if I may. Will it be confirmed that this property will be on this property, or does the owner have the opportunity or option to pay for the property that you put somewhere else?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Heideley?
Thank you, Councillor Zelkin, through the chair. Because it's a shared tree, that would be a discussion through the between both residents of where the tree would eventually end up. Even though one resident owns a very small portion of the tree, it's still a jointly owned tree. So that would be a discussion that they would have.
But just for clarification, Mr. Heideley, it would be replanted on the residential properties involved, not in some other location in the municipality.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much. And with respect to tree canopy coverage, in the situations like this, where does the district have an opportunity to influence tree canopy coverage, percent coverage on properties when these sort of things come forward? If you could just help me understand how we're going to meet our 35% coverage in general with respect to the strategy we're trying to follow.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Heideley, if you can maybe briefly remind us of when trees get replaced, 1-to-1, 2-to-1, et cetera, under the tree protection bylaw.
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor Zelka, and through the chair. Essentially, any tree that is dead, diseased, or dying is replaced 1-to-1. That is new in the revised bylaw as of 2018, and that constituted the vast majority of our tree loss at about 86%. Previous to that addition to the bylaw, very few of those trees were actually replaced. What's also changed in the bylaw is that any tree that fell inside the actual building envelope didn't have to be replaced either. That is now not the case either. And any tree that may be impacted just outside the building envelope and would have to be removed as a replacement of 2-to-1. Any new build or any major renovation this is where we capture the 35% or 45% or 20% if it's commercial. So that's how we're working with that. When we move forward with the urban forest strategy, et cetera, and we have conversations with residents about the streets or the trees that we're planting on residential streets, that conversation also includes an encouragement to them to begin to plant private or trees on their private property.
Excellent. Thank you. If I may have a supplemental.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. So I appreciate your indication that if it's a dead or dying tree, then there's a replacement of 1 for 1. With the way the bylaw is written, since your council has an opportunity to overrule staff in this case, and it sounds like we're relatively unfettered in that respect, do we also have the ability to ask or in some ways enforce a replacement of 2 for 1? In this case, since it is a healthy, live tree that is actually not in any way, how do I say, threatening any property that I can see at least. Do we have the opportunity to replace 2 for 1 if we ask for it?
Mr. Hidley?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka, and through the chair. It could be strongly suggested. In this particular case, what we would suggest is that they would select a tree from the large canopy cover list where you would be credited 125 meters square. There's a large selection of both conifers and deciduous trees there. There's nothing that says that they have to do that, but it would be a strongly encouraged from a park's perspective to replace the canopy cover with a large tree so that there's a negligible loss or no loss at all as the tree begins to mature.
I very much appreciate that. Sheriff, I may just follow up on so I can understand what I think I've been told. I wanted to ask in particular, are we allowed, I'm considering an amendment to the motion to ask that this tree be replaced with 2 for 1. Are we allowed to do that under the bylaw as written today, please?
Thank you. I might go to our administrative staff on that one. And I don't know that we can put conditions on when doing reconsideration, but perhaps Ms. Rella, do you have an answer for that question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Article 13.5 of the bylaws says council may confirm, overturn, or modify the decision of the manager of park services. It doesn't explicitly go into the detail about 2 for 1, but perhaps that could be determined as part of the modifying the decision.
So I might make a suggestion if that's a consideration of the council. I'm not sure. I guess my concern here would be just enforcement. We had a suggestion from Mr. Hidley that a tree being replaced be of a larger option selected so that the mature coverage would be equivalent to the existing tree. And that would not necessarily require 2 trees. It might just require 1 tree. So perhaps the request could be that the applicant in selecting the tree be asked to find the replacement in a way that achieves similar coverage to the existing tree with the assistance of parks. Something along those lines, maybe a little more general.
And I very much appreciate the suggestion, Chair. If that could possibly be, I don't know, could that be asked to the proponent at some case to see whether that would be part of a decision-making process? And in which case, 1 tree would probably suffice, at least for me.
Yeah, it's a little difficult. We have an agent for the owner here, so it's hard to ask specifically if that's doable or not, other than to make the request. And I think you've heard the concerns raised here at the table and can reflect them back. I'm not sure how, Mr. Hidley, is there a mechanism by which that could be enforced in reality? Is there a viable mechanism by which the ask of the replacement be of a substantial size, not just a tree of the approved list? Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
It could be a request, Your Worship. In the tree protection bylaw, the size of the tree that we would inspect has to be at least 2 meters in size and have a basal diameter of 4 centimeters when planted. So that's a substantial tree from a nursery per se. And if the tree was selected from the list of recommended trees and was one of the larger varieties, where you get 125 meters squared, One tree would probably suffice to replace the canopy cover of this one Leyland cypress.
If I may finish up, Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
I very much appreciate the comments that have been shared, especially around this item with respect to tree canopy. And I would certainly hope that the agent would take the comments of council back to the proponent. If another council member wanted to possibly put forward an amendment in this area, I would certainly consider supporting it, although I would hope that the proponent would follow through on a larger tree. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. We've gone around the table here for discussion. I think the comments have been well heard by the applicant here. I'll just finish it with my comments. Then I don't want to rehash what we've already said. I think ultimately for me, the comments made to keep the tree are correct. And really at the end of the day, it comes down to the right tree. And I think I would like to encourage people to plant trees and to plant the right trees and to even seek to replace the wrong trees with the right trees to manage climate change and other things. This is a very borderline case, I'll admit that, but I don't want to be in the position where it is a case-by-case basis. It doesn't set direct precedent on anything. This is not an ideal tree model, but it is certainly borderline. And we've had similar cases come where they've been Douglas firs and other more substantive species, and we have declined those for those reasons, that they're appropriate tree species for the space, even though they're large and cast shadows and things. So I think we have to take these as they come, and for that reason, I'm okay supporting the motion. But I definitely would ask that the owner of the property seek to work with our staff to find an appropriate species for that if this passes. So.
I could just respond to that if it would make you or give you some comfort or at least information. In Ms. Rodier's letter to council, she says, and names those trees that she's planted, and says, quotes, "We will happily plant any tree."
Yeah, so no.
The Leyland, she's well aware that if this permit had been
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Unfortunately, at this point, we have to just consider our debate at these pieces. But I do appreciate the clarification. And
if you're wondering whether I'll pass the comments on to her, well, I will. And she's already told you that she's willing to plant a tree.
yeah, thank you. I don't see any other discussion on this. So the motion as it stands is to overturn the decision of the staff. In this case, to approve the removal of the tree would be the net effect. So not seeing any other discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? I have Councillor Zelka, Councillor Appleton, and Councillor Green opposed. That carries. So with that, the removal will be permitted. So you'll be working with staff. There's a further motion on here as well, if I could just have it, that the Director of Corporate Service provide a written record of this decision to the property owner.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Thank you very much.
And do we have to move receipt, Mayor?
Yeah, we should have a motion
I'll
to
move
receive.
receipt of the report.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Thank you. Procedurally, we just like to have that clear so people can search our minutes in future and see it, the decisions are made. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Thank you, members of council. You've given it thoughtful consideration, and I'll pass on your comments to Ms. Rodier.
Thank you so much. We're moving on to some of the more land use items here on our agenda. Item number 8.1, we have Mr. Weber. This is an advisory design panel and development variance permit for 3005 Devon Road. Welcome, Mr. Weber.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The District of Oak Bay is in receipt of a combined upland study and design and development variance permit application to undertake renovations to an existing single-family home located at 3005 Devon Road. The proposal involves recladding the residence with both stucco and horizontal cedar siding, enclosing an existing carport and constructing an addition behind it, as well as expanding the deck above, altering the fenestration, including the front entranceway, including around the front entranceway, and adding and removing windows, removing an existing greenhouse attached to the rear of the residence and constructing a below-grade patio at this location, and constructing a new accessory building in the rear yard. To construct the addition to the rear of the attached garage as proposed, 2 variances to the zoning bylaw are required. A relaxation of the minimum required interior side lot line setback from 4.57 meters to 2.8 meters from the north side lot line, and a relaxation of the minimum total side lot line setback from 12.19 meters to 6.94 meters for the south and north interior side lot lines. These variance requests are a result of the applicant's wish to construct a proposed addition directly behind the existing garage, and the existing garage being legal non-conforming with the previously mentioned setback requirements. While the degree of non-conformity with the existing setbacks is not proposed to be increased as part of the proposal, variances are required as additional floor area is being built within the minimum required setback areas. No protected trees are proposed to be removed as part of the proposed works, and a total of 6 new trees are replanted. And council may note that I have attached a copy of the proposed planting locations to this set of drawings attached to the agenda. The application was reviewed at the October 5th, 2021 Advisory Design Panel meeting, and the panel recommended that council consider the approval of both the Uplands Setting Design and Development Permit applications as presented. As the subject properties within an area designated as the Uplands within the district's official community plan, staff reviewed the proposal for conformance with the Uplands Setting Design guidelines. Staff determined that the proposal is not anticipated to have significant impacts to views and shadowing or create overlook and privacy issues for neighboring properties. Furthermore, the siting and design of the existing residence is terrain largely unchanged and is not anticipated to have significant impacts on the form and character of the neighborhood or the maintenance of this established park-like setting. Therefore, staff consider the proposal to be supportable. After the initial council review of the proposal on October 25th council meeting, staff mailed notice of the variance request to all properties within 50 meters of the subject property on October 28th in accordance with the Land Use Procedures and Fees Bylaw. As of the date of this meeting, no public correspondence has been received. Staff are requesting council direction on this application, and the applicant, Todd Martin, is here to speak to the application as well. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome, Mr. Martin, but I will just make a call. If anybody watching wishes to address council on this item, this is open for public input. If I may just, if we could, I think the phone number is posted up on the screen. So that's the 1-800 number with the meeting ID and the passcode. You can call in to that, or if you're within the Zoom application, then the phone number is also visible there. You may also, if you're on the Zoom, hit the reactions and do the raise hand, and you'll pop up to the top of the screen, and we can take your comments there. So with that, I'll give it a minute because, of course, there is a bit of a time lag before our stream gets out. But if there are any questions of council on this, go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. Just, I generally am in agreement with the plan that is before us, the application that's before us. I am just wondering, though, we didn't have any discussion last time, and I'm wondering if staff could clarify, with the accessory building being built behind the garage, are these plans reviewed by the fire department at the time that they are received, just for accessibility, should it be required in an emergency event?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Weber, perhaps you can go over the review process on changes like this.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. No, fire department referrals are not part of a typical development review process at this stage.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions? I don't see any here, so I'll go to Ms. Williams and ask if there's any, are there any, I don't see anybody on our internal pieces or anybody who've called in to the line to speak to council on this matter?
No, Your Worship, nobody at this time.
Okay. I think we've probably given that adequate time for public input. So perhaps I'll just start with a motion to receive, and then we'll get a motion on the piece.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion to receive? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That's great. And then another motion to deal with the main matter. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that Uplands Siting Design ADP 00139 and Development Variance Permit DVP 00117-3005 be approved.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Any discussion on this matter? I don't see any. I will just reflect the comments that were made when it was before us before, which is just a general appreciation to the applicants for modifying an existing home and doing it with, in a way, proportional and appropriate for the siting on this land. I don't see any other comments, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. So thank you very much, Mr. Martin, for coming tonight, and thank you and good luck with the work moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item number 8.2 has been moved off of the agenda, so we're on to new business. It's a chance for any notices of motions. Rather, go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to inform Council of a notice of motion for the next available meeting relating to two components. Firstly, to initiate a review of civic-owned monuments with respect to the language used relating to Indigenous peoples, and secondly, to initiate a focused review of the 1925 municipal plaque in Walburn Park.
Thank you very much for the notice. Any other discussion? Any other new business?
I apologize, Chair. It's Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Sorry, I didn't hear the second half of the notice of motion. Could I hear that second half again, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Always happy to clarify. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the second portion relates specifically to conducting a review of the 1925 municipal plaque, district-owned plaque in Walburn Park for the same reasons with respect to language used with respect to Indigenous peoples.
Thank you. I don't see any other new business, so we are just moving now at this point to a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment. Moved
and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. We are now adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And we will see you all soon. I'm trying to think. Certainly next Monday, perhaps before that. I'm trying to remember if we have any special meetings this week. I lose track. There's batten everything down tonight, whatever you do, and I hope you have a safe and dry evening.
Recording stopped.